Hey everybody, my name is Sergey Chernyshev. I organize New York Web Performance Meetup. Today I'm going to talk about using heat maps to define performance metrics and improve on the current metrics that we have. This work actually was born because of constant talking to all of you at the meetups, at Meet for Speed sessions, and kind of looking at people's websites over and over and over and trying to figure out what do we need to measure. Original ideas were discussed at the meetup, at the Meet for Speed, about a year ago, at the end of March last year. Before we go into heat maps and how we can improve the metrics, let's talk about why do we need to measure speed, right? There are multiple reasons for measuring the speed. Depending on where you are in the organization, you will find that some of it is more relatable to you. Monitoring for degradation is probably, if you're in operations, that's your main job, right? To make sure speed stays fast and users can see the experience, consistent experience. If you're on the development side of the shop, you can see that analyzing code for performance issues and kind of understanding how you can improve performance is another challenge that we have. And we need to look at your performance in some different way. Once we do the improvements, improving performance is fun for all of us, I'm positive. Like, it's amazing stuff to do, like, we all love it. But sometimes we need to make sure that actually it sped up the experience, right? And to be able to verify that we are achieving our goals of speeding up the experience, we need to measure as well. So that is for ops and developers, right? But at some point, after we did the improvements, or we have a plan for 500 improvements we want to do, we need to make sure that the business gives us time for that. And they will definitely come to you and say, okay, you have 2 improvements you need to make, and we can give you, 20 hours to do that. And you need to pick which improvements to do. And for that reason, you need to understand what is the performance improvement that you can get, what is the baseline, where you can go, and you need to do measurement to accomplish that. And in the end, when performance improvements stop being 20 hours improvements, but become like 600-hour improvements, so that become complicated, or you need to onboard the vendor who to solve a particular problem, it becomes a question of a budget as well. You need to come back and say, this many seconds improvement that will take us 2 months to make will bring this many millions of dollars to the play. Because otherwise, you will have to do it in the middle of the night and in your spare time, and nothing great comes out of being tired and sneaking it in as a quality piece. For that reason, we need to know what to measure. And I want to give you kind of current state of where we stand today with the performance metrics. Obviously not all of them. Paul covered so much that it's probably impossible to define all the metrics out there, but kind of a few classes of metrics. We started our journey in measuring performance at the kind of request level and kind of network backend server level, because we all knew that's where we need to look, right? DNS, connectivities, SSL, and time to first byte, which usually represents how hard your server is doing things, right? Those were the first metrics we got, and they got us pretty far, and they can help you understand, especially for the first request and the page load, it's quite important to measure those. But that's not enough, and we looked at page loads, document complete events, and full network completion as a way to kind of describe the whole page experience, not just request performance, right? Describing how page loads, where JavaScript executes, where things are rendered, when it's done loading. Unfortunately, all of that is kind of a network, very low-level kind of measurement, and there are a couple better measurements that we got lately, well, a few years already, starting with the first pane, and about the fault rendering, speed index that Paul also mentioned. I'll go into detail shortly. But those are more metrics that are closer to that business, to that user experience side of the things, and a little farther from our technology stack that we all love to instrument and measure, right? When you need to pick the metrics, the important part is to always remember that we don't need to measure technology. Only we geeks, we people who love all those cogs rotating, only we want to measure that. Business doesn't care. Users don't care. we need to measure user experience. Moreover, all of the metrics that we try to derive are just a proxy for that user experience metric that we ultimately need to define. Maybe one day we'll have the attachment to human brains or something like that, and we will really know what users experience, but I would not want to have one on my brain, so I doubt it will be a reality, right? All of the metrics that we are building today and will be coming up in the future are just a proxy for that user experience. Every time you pick a measurement for a new initiative or when some industry shift happens, like we have single-page applications making a nightmare for every performance measurement vendor out there, right? You need to think of what are we measuring, making sure we measure what matters and not what's easy to measure. That's why we have these new metrics that are useful and more visual, more user experience metrics. And we start with first page, which is an amazing reverse metric. It's very reliable. It shows you when nothing useful happened yet. And in this particular test, 3.5 seconds passed, nothing useful happened. It's an amazing metric. You want to get it to the zero, and it's universally measurable across every website, right? Nothing happened, it means it needs to be reduced. Very good metric, kind of negative because, well, nothing happened. The next metric, currently easily or somewhat easily automatable, is about the default measurement time. When everything rendered, the full visible part of the screen finished rendering. And it's very useful, right? It's kind of the ultimate goal. Well, all of your experience that you try to send to the user, and this is seen on the homepage a couple days ago, finished rendering. In this particular case, it took 15.3 seconds for every visible pixel to finish rendering. And it's also very useful. But, first of all, we don't like that it took 15.3 seconds, right? Second of all, we all realize, and probably if you've been to one of our sessions or just pay attention to this, you kind of say, okay, but why do I care about that last ad that loaded, or why do I care about this little maybe pop-up over here that loaded, right? We don't really care, and the challenge is that today there is no reliable way of measuring that. You can only know when everything has rendered with above the fold. Paul mentioned Speed Index, and that's the tool that Patrick Meenan built with web page tests, essentially analyzing the very same video stream, and this horizontal 2 lines of screenshots is a thing called Filmstrip that web page tests generate. Analyzing this video stream, he creates basically a histogram of completion of page render. Incrementally going from 0, that's the green first paint time, all the way to about the fold time, and that's the blue arrow over there. We define that range with those two metrics, but Speed Index allows us to understand the in-between state of where we stand while the page loads. Unfortunately, Speed Index is a number like that. It's 618. A little hard to communicate what that means, right? It's probably the best metrics today that can be automated because you need to reduce that number. That's all you need to know. But it's relatively hard to explain what that number means. In terms of completion, like this 10% over here counts towards improvement in Speed Index, but it doesn't really tell you what on the page contributed to that. So it's also somewhat generic improvement over from nothing to everything. It does give you context into incremental improvement, but also generic across the page. Good news, it can be completely automated. You don't need to do anything. Just record the video of page screen loading, and you can derive this metric. How do we measure what matters? How do we define what matters on the page? That is the challenge that we face today. And for many of you who found that on-load events and other metrics like that don't match the real user experience with all the new technologies that let you postpone the loading, this and that, you probably struggle with that. And that's what user timing API is trying to solve, and that's the state-of-the-art technology today where essentially, and it's a standard from W3C, it's a third timing API that they came up with. It lets you basically instrument every part of your page and fire a JavaScript mark saying, this is when my video started to play, for example. If your video is a primary content, you want to know when the stream started to play. And it can be picked up by real user measurement tools. On the page, you can beacon it back, or synthetic tools will go and check the user timing API and record that. Web page test supports that. And this is state of the art today. Unfortunately, it is not always exactly what user experience is, because when you instrument JavaScript, you define what you want to happen. Oh, I'm making an abstraction for something to happen. Whatever it rendered on the screen as you hoped it to do or not, it's a different story. For example, you might be instrumenting your single page framework and injecting it into page-to-page or view-to-view transitions, but that only tells you when transition is supposed to happen, and not when all the assets loaded, when things rendered and things like that. So that's one of the challenges with it. Not crazy challenge, but important one. But the most important hard part here is that you actually need to instrument all the business pieces of your pages. And depending on where you are in the development cycle, you might not be able to do that at all. It might be hard to start with. You need to really write JavaScript, inject it onto all of your code, and know where to inject it, where not to inject it, and how not to break the rest of the application. But also, you might be releasing in 3 months. You might not have a window to deploy that piece of code for a while. It's still a technical solution, probably the most versatile today. Because of those issues, I wanted to introduce a new method that will let us define what matters in a different way. The term heat map is used in a generic way. It's not about visualizing the data necessarily, but about defining which areas of your page are more important than others, kind of defining those gradients from, okay, this pixel I might not care about, but this one is more important. This is kind of new research, so I apologize if it's a little rough on the edges, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. One way of defining heat maps is the most traditional one. If you're familiar with what heat maps do, it's the most developed one. Eye tracking and click tracking can give you what users actually are doing on your site. And marketing teams use that all the time today. Not all of them, but many teams use that to analyze what's important. And the chart on the top is for eye tracking, right, during the user studies. And the chart on the bottom is click tracking that, for example, Google Analytics can give you and say, hey, that link gave you that many clicks, and this link gave you this many clicks. This data can be used to emphasize what's important. That's what users do. That's what users pay attention to. Unfortunately, it's relatively hard to capture, right? You need to instrument all of that. You need to find a tool that can provide this kind of information for you. You need to collect that data, attach it to your synthetic or RAM measurement tool. So it's relatively hard to create that pipeline. There is another issue with that. It shows you the current state of the situation. Real users measurement problem, right? It only shows you what users are doing right now. There is also a cause and effect problem here that basically people click on what's visible fast, right? If they look at what's showed up, right, relatively fast, and it's hard to know if you're speeding up what's already fast because people click on that. The great news, it can be fully automated. Technologies somewhat exist today. We can instrument real users, work with that. I don't have enough access to data like that, so I didn't do enough analysis on this. There is another side of the spectrum, which is defining what matters through business decisions and product features. We all build websites for a reason. Every piece of the site is built to deliver some value, and decision-making around that is already happening. Unfortunately, it's hard to automate. Every website is different, every web page is different, every component of every page is specific to that business use case. Also, industries are different, so you cannot really apply what is good for one industry to another industry and things like that. Good news is that you don't have all of your pages to be different, right? You have a primary set of templates that define how pages look. And yes, products change on your e-commerce page, and news change on the hourly minute or minute-to-minute basis, but the page layout stays the same. You can see that CNN page at the top and the Amazon page, homepage at the bottom. Like, they're very different, but they probably will stay like that for quite a while. Another great news, actually, I think that's the core of the solution here, is that your business team, when they design the page, they're already thinking this way. They already think, what will be the prime real estate on my page? They already think, what is the most important piece on this page? What is navigation? What is branding? Things like that. If we look at general process of how pages load, we can actually abstract away those industry differences. The interaction on the page consists of this sequence of events where first we acknowledge that the user did click somewhere, right? Then we help them see that they landed where they expected to go. And then we show them the primary content, at least this is the happy path. This is how we want it to happen in that sequence, right? We want to show them the primary content. They want them to start looking at it and then allow interacting with it as well. Like it can be a call to action or it can be an interactive piece on a media site, for example. Then we show secondary content to help them kind of make other decisions, or it can be advertising or whatever applies to your business. And then we do invisible things. Invisibles are great. You don't need to care about them in terms of user experience. So my point is that if you approach this in your business and define these steps, it might help you unify how you approach every page, every part of the site. Once you define that, you can go ahead and annotate them. You can go to that business design meeting and say, hey, what's our core navigation and branding that will allow users to know that they landed where they expected to be? And they can go, and this is the CN page, obviously, and they can go and kind of outline, this is where we put our design components to achieve that they already thought. And if you talk to designers, they think a lot about it. They already thought about that. And then when you say, what is your primary content here, you will definitely have the answer. That's kind of the whole part of the business. We can go and say, that particular area is the primary content. And I didn't go in my exercise to define every piece of it, but you can go and define secondary content. Maybe if you want to separate advertising in a different component, you can do that as well. After that, what you can do is create these heat map cutouts, and you say, hey, everything within those red areas is our navigation piece and branding piece. And the rest, I don't care for the matter of understanding how fast this happens. And for primary content, it's that area. I don't care about the rest. This is our primary area that we need to analyze. And you go and you kind of apply that template over your video recording of your page progression. That will give you resulting video that you can analyze in the very same way we analyze the full video for above the fold and speed index. But with that particular goal in mind, branding and navigation or primary content. This is branding and navigation on that page. As you can see, this is applied and cut out to the video. I didn't want to put the video here, but essentially this is what you do. You apply that cutout. When you look at visual completeness graph, similar to what we saw at speed index, you can see that if you isolate that area, this is how it behaves. And by the time of 8 seconds, this is when you reach 100% of rendering for that particular component on your page. In addition to that green and blue arrow that we had on our Filmstrip and kind of our timeline that we're measuring, we now have a red arrow that says our branding is done at this point in time. So we improved on that metric. We defined that destination. And same goes for primary content. We do cut out in a different area. We do visual completeness chart similar to how we did the navigation. And again, at 11 seconds, our primary content finished rendering. We ignore the rest for the purposes of this metric, and it gives us another point to aim for. And good news is that it doesn't matter what the story is. Day to day, your layout probably doesn't change as much as your content. And you can actually somewhat reliably track that progress of that metric and achieve stable results. There is some thresholding you need to do because JPEG quality or some minor animations can happen, and so you don't need to measure 100%. You might need to have some 90-something% that you measure. In the end, we added 2 primary metrics that we had in the past, or 3, I would say. First pane and above the fold, from nothing to everything metric. And we used similar techniques that we used for speed index to identify visual progression from nothing to everything. And we added 2 more just for those particular business goals, and we said core branding and navigation took 8 seconds, primary content took 11 seconds. Now you can go back to the business and say, during design decisions, that's what we need to pay attention to. That's where our performance budget goes against. That's the performance metric that we want to improve upon. Let's say 2 million go against this metric and 10 million go against this metric. Let's prioritize, let's move budgets, allocate our time. And by the way, those could be $100 and $200, it doesn't matter. But you still have a baseline that you can use to talk to the business. That's the core of the methodology that I propose to use to define those metrics. It's alternative to the JavaScript implementation and user timing API that can also happen. And one downside of this approach is that you cannot use it with a real user measurement, obviously, because video capturing today is not really appropriate for real user measurement. You cannot transfer that much data back from each client. But it allows you, at the same time, analyze the result independently of how the code is structured, what happens in your code. You just have a video stream, that's all. That's everything you need. And I believe that is the beauty of why web page test became so successful, because of these film strips, because it allowed you visually represent this data and visually analyze it. And this is how we help our members when they come to Meet for Speed sessions. This is probably the first thing we go to. What are we measuring? What are we trying to optimize for? We go to the film strip, we analyze, hey, this is where things actually happen. And we help them understand that maybe time to first paint doesn't apply in their case, right? In some cases, it does apply. You have a good render to first paint, but in many cases, it doesn't. Current implementation for the tooling that I use to create this data is selector-based. So essentially, you define CSS selectors for the areas that you want to emphasize, and then you use custom metric code. If you go to web page test documentation, there is a special thing that you can run at the end of the test, and it basically measures where in the resulting page are those areas right now. It captures all of those dimensions of those boxes and goes and analyzes the video for that test, basically using image magic and MPEG tools to kind of create your version of each video. And then it runs the visual metrics script that Patrick Wiener created that analyzes the visual progress charts that you see on web page test. The very same tool is run to analyze these metrics, and you just do some thresholding on that, and you get those pretty good numbers. I was impressed. And kudos definitely go to Patrick Wiener and his creation of awesome tools, web page test and visual metrics that let us do this synthetic analysis. I'm standing on his giant shoulders, for sure. At our Meet for Speed sessions, that's what we do. We do analysis. We help people understand how to solve problems. I'd like to thank Antoine, who's with Akamai and who's our organizer for these sessions and hosts us every month at Akamai office. I welcome you to join and come, and we'll be happy to talk about it more, because that's where such ideas and such kind of changes in current methodology are born. That's all I have. Thank you.